You wake up tired. You scroll to escape. You feel stuck, hollow, angry, or numb. You wonder why life hurts so much. But maybe the pain isn't from the world. Maybe it's from the roles you're trapped in, roles Nietzsche warned would destroy us from the inside. Life is suffering. This stark truth lies at the heart of Nietzsche's philosophy. Yet some of us suffer more than we need to, caught in self-made traps of character and mindset. Today, we explore 4 such personality types that are doomed to suffer. As you hear about them, you may recognize a friend, a rival, or an uneasy reflection of yourself. Prepare for an unapologetic journey inward. This is not about blame or easy comfort. It's about confrontation, direct and bold, with parts of the self we often deny. Nietzsche believed in facing the hardest truths about ourselves with bravery, ripping off the comforting masks that hide our pain. In that spirit, let's shine a light on these 4 types: the moral narcissist, the eternal victim, the hollow conformist, and the fearful truth dodger. Each lives differently, but all share one destiny: needless suffering. By dissecting them through modern stories and Nietzschean insight, we aim to expose how these mindsets poison our lives and how we might transform this suffering into growth. So ask yourself, am I truly living authentically, or am I falling into one of these patterns? Let's begin with an honest look in the mirror. Nietzsche once challenged his readers, "Become who you are." Are you ready to do that? The path won't be gentle. But if you're seeking personal transformation through philosophy and existential self-awareness, you already know the truth may hurt, but it can also set you free. Now, take a breath and steel your nerves. Our first stop is with a person who perches atop a pedestal of righteousness. A person who is certain of their own goodness while condemning the world around them. Firstly, the moral narcissist. Let's picture this. A man sits alone in the blue glow of his smartphone at midnight. His heart races as he types a scathing comment on social media, calling out someone's immorality for the 3rd time this week. Yesterday, he blasted a stranger for being ignorant and evil. Today, he's exposing a friend's personal flaw under the guise of speaking truth. Each time, he feels a surge of pride. He doesn't notice how his friends slowly drift away, exhausted by his constant moral grandstanding. All he sees is a world that's always in the wrong, and himself, the lone righteous crusader. In his mind, he is the hero who must correct everyone. But in the quiet moments when the screen's glow fades, he feels strangely empty and alone. This is the moral narcissist. Outwardly, he's a preacher of high values. Inwardly, he's in love with his own supposed virtue. His morality isn't about actual goodness or compassion, it's about ego. Nietzsche would have ripped into this type without mercy. In fact, Nietzsche warns that simply becoming moral is not inherently virtuous at all. One can obey morality for ugly reasons, out of weakness, out of vanity, or out of a craving for power over others. To become moral is not in itself moral, he wrote in Daybreak. Following morality blindly can be slavish or vain or self-interested. The moral narcissist exemplifies this. He has subjugated himself to a moral code not out of humble goodness, but to serve his own superiority. Every act of judgment, every public outrage feeds his narcissism. He isn't really trying to make the world better. He's trying to make himself feel better than the world. Nietzsche saw this pattern clearly in the moralizers of his day. He dissected how so-called good men often use moral condemnation as a subtle form of revenge, a way to feel powerful by denouncing others. The moral narcissist elevates himself by pushing others down. It's moral bullying. Think of the online warriors who shame and cancel others, not purely to right a wrong, but because calling someone else evil makes them feel like the virtuous one. This is what Nietzsche might call a priestly arrogance, reminiscent of the ascetic preachers in his Genealogy of Morals. Those priests claimed the moral high ground, but their righteousness was fueled by hidden impulses, resentment, thirst for influence, even hatred of the worldly joys they themselves couldn't have. The moral narcissist similarly turns morality into a mirror for his own ego. What suffering does this create? Ironically, a great deal. By fixating on others' sins, the moral narcissist neglects his own soul. He alienates friends and potential allies. No one likes to be around someone who constantly moralizes and never admits fault. He may start conflicts in the name of justice, but end up isolated. And deep down, there's often an insecure void, a fear that if he isn't seen as good, he's worthless. He chases external validation of his moral purity the way a vain man chases compliments. It's a never-ending hunger. Each triumph of being right is fleeting. There's always another flaw in someone to attack, another cause to loudly champion, because silence would force him to face himself. In the end, the moral narcissist suffers from hollowness. His moral victories ring empty because they were never about real growth or love, only about winning. Nietzsche's philosophy offers a brutal wake-up call to this type. Instead of obsessing over good versus evil in others, Nietzsche urges us to go beyond good and evil. That means recognizing that our moral judgments often mask our own desires and weaknesses. The moral narcissist would do well to ask, what am I avoiding in myself by attacking others? Perhaps he avoids his own sense of inadequacy or guilt. Nietzsche would tell him to drop the self-deception and practice honesty and humility. True strength, in Nietzsche's view, comes from self-overcoming, improving oneself, not from condemning others to prop up the ego. To drive the point home, Nietzsche gives a famous warning about the danger of righteous crusades. Beware that when fighting monsters, you yourself do not become a monster. For when you gaze long into the abyss gazes also into you. The moral narcissist, in fighting what he sees as monsters, the bad people, the wrongdoers, risks becoming monstrous himself, consumed by hate, arrogance, and cruelty, all in the name of virtue. He gazes so long into the abyss of others' supposed evil that his own soul darkens. Think of an activist so zealous they justify harassing or doxing their opponents, they become the very thing they claim to stand against. Or the strict moral parent who ends up emotionally abusing their child for their own good. This is the abyss gazing back. The irony is profound. The moral narcissist inflicts suffering, even as he claims the moral high ground, and he inflicts it on himself as well. His relationships wither, his growth stalls, and he lives in a constant state of anger and disappointment, since the world never meets his high standards. Nietzsche would likely diagnose him with a bad case of self-righteous delusion, an inability to see that his virtue is vicious at its core. We see the moral narcissist everywhere today. It's the social media user who loudly virtue signals attacking others for every minor misstep to boost their own moral reputation. It's the friend who always has to be more ethical or more politically pure than everyone else, and turns every hangout into a lecture. It might even be a part of ourselves, that part that enjoys judging, that secretly enjoys the moral outrage because it makes us feel superior. But as Nietzsche challenges, what if that energy is better turned inward into improving our own selves rather than judging others? The transformation for a moral narcissist begins when he steps off the soapbox and examines his motives. Humility can break the cycle. Imagine our midnight keyboard warrior pausing and thinking, why am I really doing this? Am I helping or just feeding my pride? If he's honest, he might feel a sting, the sting of vanity unmasked. That sting is the start of self-awareness. The moral narcissist suffers from an excess of pride disguised as morality. Now let's turn to almost the mirror opposite type, someone who suffers from a surplus of self-pity and blame. If the moral narcissist refuses to see his own faults, the eternal victim wallows in them, or rather wallows in how the world has done him wrong. Get ready to meet the person for whom life is an endless string of injustices and who takes a dark comfort in that. Secondly, the eternal victim. Now, imagine this. A young man drags himself into work late again. His face is set in a permanent frown. Ask him how he's doing, and you'll get an exasperated sigh. Terrible as usual. His boss criticized his last project. Unfairly, he insists because the instructions were unclear. His recent breakup. All her fault, he'll tell you. I only ever get crazy partners. He scrolls through social media and grumbles that all his friends have it easier. Life has it easier on everyone but him. When a colleague gently suggests a solution to one of his problems, he snaps back. You don't get it. You haven't been through what I have. In the evening, he posts a long lament on Facebook about how the world is against him. It gets a few sympathy replies, which soothe him briefly, but by next morning, he's heavy with the same resentment. Meet the eternal victim, the man for whom nothing is ever his responsibility and everything is a personal affront. The eternal victim is stuck in a story of constant persecution. This personality type feeds on the feeling of being wronged. In a twisted way, it brings comfort if all your suffering is always caused by others or by the universe, then you never have to take accountability. But this comfort is poison. Nietzsche had a powerful word for the stew of self-pity, blame, and bitterness that simmers in the eternal victim resentment. And he believed it was one of the most self-destructive forces in human life. Nothing on earth consumes a man more quickly than the passion of resentment, Nietzsche writes. Indeed, resentment is a consuming fire. It eats you from the inside, wasting your energy and spirit. We can almost see it in our story, the eternal victim's shoulders stooped under the weight of grudges, his energy sapped by constant negative rumination. Nietzsche describes resentment as a concoction of poison brewed by those who feel powerless. Imagine carrying a vial of poison in your heart, sipping from it daily. That is what living in perpetual victimhood is like. Why do people fall into this pattern? Nietzsche's insight in On the Genealogy of Morality gives us a clue. In his analysis of slave morality, he explains that those who lack power in life often cope by reversing moral values in their favor. Unable to take real revenge or action, they create an imaginary revenge in the form of a moral narrative. Those who hurt us are evil, and we, the suffering ones, are good. The eternal victim lives exactly in this narrative. He constantly says no to life, defining himself by opposition to the people he blames. If the moral narcissist said, "I am good," and you are bad out of pride, the eternal victim says, "I am good because I am hurt, and you are bad because you hurt me out of hurt pride." It's two sides of the same coin in a way. Both avoid honest self-examination. Nietzsche's words ring sharply here. The beginning of the slave's revolt in morality occurs when ressentiment itself turns creative and gives birth to values. Slave morality says no, on principle, to everything that is outside other non-self. And this no is its creative deed. The eternal victim's creative deed is to weave every pain into a story where he is the noble sufferer and others are the villains. But living this way guarantees endless suffering. Why? Because if you see yourself as forever a victim, you will find something to be victimized by no matter what. Even kindness can be twisted. The eternal victim might suspect hidden motives or feel patronized and thus still wronged. Nietzsche saw this in the psychology of religious martyrs and the downtrodden who cling to their misery as a badge of virtue. Rather than climbing out of the pit, they decorate it. For example, someone with a victim mindset might reject solutions because solving problems threatens their identity as a victim. No one has suffered like I have, they insist. It gives them a perverse form of importance and moral high ground. Nietzsche would call this a form of weakness that's been declared a strength. In Genealogy, he notes how the slave type declares qualities like humility, patience, and suffering as good because those are the qualities they have, having no other power. The eternal victim similarly claims a moral advantage in being wronged. I suffer more than others, therefore I'm special, and my oppressors are especially evil. Let's be clear, real injustices do happen. Nietzsche isn't denying that. He's saying that wallowing in resentment is self-defeating. It enslaves you to the very people or events that hurt you. By fixating on blame, you give those things endless power over you. Think of our example, man. His ex-girlfriend still controls his emotional life because he hasn't let go of the grudge. His boss's criticism still haunts him because he keeps replaying how unfair it was instead of learning from it or moving on. The eternal victim relives his pain constantly, renewing the wound each day. No wonder he suffers. Nietzsche's prescription for this is tough love. Give up your resentment. Take ownership of your life. In Ecce Homo, Nietzsche even praises the wisdom of Buddha for recognizing that overcoming resentment is the first step to recovery from suffering. To make the soul free from resentment, this was considered the first step towards recovery. He notes of Buddhist teaching. Why? Because resentment is toxic to the weak most of all. It keeps them weak. Nietzsche argues that nursing your bitterness is the worst thing for a person who feels powerless. It traps you in a state of passivity and pain. The eternal victim must do something radical to break free. Forgive, let go, or at least redirect that energy into self-improvement. Nietzsche would say, stop lying to yourself, that all your misfortune is fate or someone else's fault. Sure, maybe much of it was not your choice, but your response is. As long as you choose the response of blame, you remain a slave. The moment you choose a response of action or acceptance, you reclaim power. In our contemporary world, it's easy to fall into the victim identity. We even have a term, victim mentality, and entire online communities can form around shared grievances. While there is value in validating real trauma, there's also a danger when your identity centers on being a victim, you unconsciously seek to remain one. Social media can amplify this. Posting your hardships might get supportive comments, which feels good. But if it reinforces that being wronged is what gets you attention and sympathy, you might stay in that loop instead of solving the problems. Nietzsche would ask, is your suffering serving a secret vanity? Are you in a subtle way proud of your pain? It's a disturbing question, but for the eternal victim, the honest answer is often yes. They derive a sense of moral elevation and uniqueness from it. To break out, Nietzsche offers the idea of amor fati, love of fate. This means embracing your life, including the suffering, as something you affirm rather than curse. Not to wish anything to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity. That is amor fati, Nietzsche says. In practice for the eternal victim, this means looking at each hardship and instead of saying, why me, saying, yes, this is mine. I own it now, how will I use it? It transforms the narrative from victimhood to heroism. Not the shallow heroism of the moral narcissist, but a quiet heroism of endurance and creation. For example, rather than our man lamenting his breakup as proof that all partners are terrible to me, he could accept the pain as a lesson, even a gift of clarity about what he needs to change or what kind of person suits him. Rather than resenting the boss's critique forever, he might say, "All right, it happened. Maybe it was unfair, but what can I learn or do now?" Switch jobs, improve a skill, or simply not give that person the power to define my worth. Every ounce of energy spent blaming can be redirected into building. This is hard. It feels almost like letting part of yourself die. But what is dying is the unnecessary suffering. Nietzsche challenges the eternal victim in all of us to rise from our knees. Drop the vocabulary of always and never. Those are self-fulfilling curses. Instead, he'd say, confront reality with a cold, clear eye. This happened. It hurt. But you're still here. Now, will you let it define you, or will you define yourself despite it? The eternal victim says no to life, and festers in that no. Now contrast this with our next character, someone who rarely says no to anyone or anything around him. In fact, he goes along with the crowd, does everything expected, and still finds himself drained of life. He doesn't suffer from too much pride or too much blame. He suffers from lack of self. Our next doomed personality is the hollow conformist, who has avoided suffering's challenges by avoiding individuality only to discover a different kind of emptiness. Thirdly, the hollow conformist. Envision a different man now. He's in his early 30s, and by all external measures, he's doing fine. Decent job at a marketing firm, a paycheck that covers rent, and then a social circle that grabs beers on weekends. He has the latest iPhone, wears the clothes that were in style last season, because that's what all his friends wear. Every day he scrolls through Instagram liking what he's supposed to like, celebrity memes, trending travel photos, and posting the occasional picture of his lunch or his dog to keep up appearances. In college, he chose a major his parents and counselors suggested would be safe. He's never really asked himself if he loves his job. It's just what he's supposed to do. He's on dating apps not because he longs for a true connection, but because that's what people do. You find a partner, eventually marry, check the boxes. He's not unhappy, he tells himself. But a dull anxiety hums in the background of his days. Each morning it's a little harder to get out of bed. Each night he binge-watches whatever show everyone's talking about, then falls asleep feeling vaguely empty. Sometimes, when he's honest, he admits he feels like a hollow shell living someone else's life. But that thought is scary, so he pushes it away by scrolling another hour on his phone. On paper, nothing is wrong. In his soul, something is very wrong. This is the hollow conformist. He suffers not from acute pain or high drama, but from a slow, smothering malaise. His life is comfortable yet devoid of meaning, what Nietzsche might call the tragedy of the last man. Nietzsche foresaw this type with uncanny clarity. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he introduces the last man as the ultimate conformist, a being who seeks only comfort, safety, and routine, who avoids all great passion or risk, and who ends up living a pitiful, small life. The earth has become smaller, Nietzsche writes of the land of the last men, and on it hops the man who makes everything small. We have invented happiness, say the last men, and they blink. The blink is telling. It's the blink of numbness and complacency, as if life's spark has dimmed in their eyes. The hollow conformist is on his way to becoming that last man. He's traded the heights and depths of life for a lukewarm existence, believing it would save him from suffering. But in doing so, he's sacrificed something vital, his own authentic self. Nietzsche had a fierce contempt for the herd mentality, the instinct to conform, to play it safe, to do and think as people like us do. He saw it as a force that corrupts the individual spirit. Morality is the herd instinct in the individual, he quipped, pointing out that much of what we call being good is often just code for being like everyone else. The hollow conformist exemplifies this herd morality. He's not making choices. The herd is choosing for him. Society says get a stable job, don't question things, consume what everyone consumes, and he obeys. Why? Because it's comfortable. It's easy. But Nietzsche would argue that this easy path leads straight to a kind of living death, a life without personal value creation. One of Nietzsche's most striking lines on conformity and corruption is, "The surest way to corrupt a youth is to instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently." Think about that. From a young age, we're often subtly taught that fitting in is good and standing out is bad or risky. The result? Hollow conformists everywhere, estranged from their own originality. Our man in the story isn't living his life. He's living the template life handed to him by his family, his peers, and mass culture. And while he doesn't face the obvious torments of the first two types, he suffers, in a quieter way that can be just as devastating meaninglessness. This type of suffering often manifests as chronic boredom, mild depression, or that anxious feeling of, is this all there is? It's the sense of having everything, yet nothing. In a world of plenty, the hollow conformist starves spiritually. He has avoided the pain of choosing his own path, sure, but that means he's also missed out on the joy of finding his own purpose. Nietzsche would call this person out for cowardice. It's a harsh word, but fitting. The conformist is deep down afraid of disapproval, of uncertainty, of the effort it takes to create meaning for oneself. So he hides in the crowd. He is, as Nietzsche might put it, tranquilized by the trivial. The daily doses of social media, pop entertainment, and conventional milestones keep him sedated enough that he doesn't have to face the yawning question of why his life matters. However, as the story shows, that question creeps in anyway, in the quiet moments. You cannot completely silence the voice of your true self without consequences. So the hollow conformist does suffer, perhaps, from a sense of emptiness that no consumer purchase or promotion at work can fill, or from a latent despair that surfaces in midlife as a full-blown crisis. I've followed all the rules, why do I feel so dead inside? Nietzsche's writing foretells this crisis. He saw European society moving toward a comfortable, shallow, last-man existence, and he practically shouted in response, "No, do not go quietly into that good night. Live dangerously, seek challenge, seek depth, become the creator of your own values." For Nietzsche, the antithesis of the conformist last man is the Übermensch, overman, or superman, not a tyrant over others, but one who has overcome the herd in himself. The Übermensch creates meaning in a godless world through art, innovation, courage, and self-determination. Now, the concept of the Übermensch might be lofty, but we can translate it into practical terms. It means living authentically and creatively. Our hollow conformist doesn't need to suddenly become a world-changing hero. He needs to start by recognizing that his life is his, and he must shape it, or it will shape him. As Nietzsche puts it elsewhere, no one can construct for you the bridge upon which precisely you must cross the stream of life. No one but you alone. That is a call to individual responsibility for meaning. The hollow conformist is a familiar figure in modern Western life, especially among young adults who feel pressured to follow a certain script, go to college, get the job, get the house, etc., only to find it doesn't deliver the fulfillment it promised. Social media amplifies conformity too. We curate our lives to look like everyone else's highlight reel, inadvertently living for the appearance of a good life rather than the reality of one. We also see a form of hollow conformism in the epidemic of hustle culture burnout. Many people throw themselves into the work treadmill because society venerates being busy and grinding. They chase the metrics of success that everyone else chases, money status, without asking if those are their values. This often leads to burnout and a collapse that forces the question, why am I doing any of this? By then, the suffering is full-blown. Anxiety attacks, identity crisis, etc. Nietzsche's voice across time implores us to ask that question now, not after we break. Why are you doing this? If the answer is because I'm supposed to be careful, you may be living someone else's life plan. To the hollow conformist in each of us, Nietzsche says, dare to be different. Value those who think differently, who live on their own terms. They can seem unsettling because they remind us of the road not taken, but they have something precious, a life alive. Recall Nietzsche's admonition. The surest way to corrupt a youth is to make them prefer sameness over difference. The same applies to the adult. The surest way to waste your life is to live it according to others' expectations rather than your own calling. Yes, forging your own path involves risk, uncertainty, and possibly failure. All forms of suffering the conformist tried to avoid. But here's Nietzsche's paradox. The effort and pain of becoming yourself are worth it, whereas the attempt to avoid all pain leads to a flat existence that isn't worth living. Imagine our story's conformist deciding to finally confront that uneasy feeling. Perhaps he takes time off work to really explore his passions. Maybe he loved writing or music once, and he gives it a go again. Perhaps he questions the career he fell into and considers a change, even if it means some instability. His friends might raise eyebrows. You're doing that's risky, not what people usually do. And he'll have to face that disapproval. But in doing so, he'll start to feel alive, directing his own will to power inward to change his life. The emptiness will begin to fill with self-chosen meaning. This is the cure for the hollow conformist's suffering. To stop being hollow, you must start carving out your authentic shape. We've seen the pain of too much safety in the hollow conformist. He avoids challenges and thus avoids growth. Now our final character takes avoidance to another crucial arena, the arena of truth, where the conformist avoids standing out. The fearful truth dodger avoids looking within. This last type is perhaps the most insidious because he can take many forms. It's time to meet the person who will do anything to escape uncomfortable truths, even if it means living in a comfortable lie. Fourthly, the fearful truth dodger. Last scenario. A man sits across from his girlfriend at dinner. She asks him where their relationship is going. She's noticed he seems distant. He knows he's no longer in love, but he cannot bear to say it. His heart pounds. Everything's fine, he lies with a forced smile. A week later, instead of having a painful, honest talk, he simply disappears from her life. Doesn't return calls, ignores her messages. He ghosts her because facing the truth would be too uncomfortable. Now, another scene. At work, this same man is overwhelmed and miserable in his role. But when his colleague hints that he seems unhappy, he quickly laughs it off. Oh no, all good. Every night he escapes. Sometimes it's hours of video games, sometimes a bottle of whiskey, sometimes mindlessly scrolling through Netflix or Reddit until 3 a.m. In those late hours, a gnawing thought tries to surface. I'm wasting my life. But he smothers it with another distraction. If he keeps the music playing, he won't have to hear that truth. He's not ignorant. A part of him knows he's running away, that he's afraid to make changes or confront realities. Yet he keeps running day after day. This is the fearful truth dodger, the person who finds refuge in avoidance. Of all the types, the fearful truth dodger might be the one most of us have been at one time or another. It's profoundly human to shy away from painful truths. But when avoidance becomes a way of life, suffering only multiplies in the shadows. Nietzsche's philosophy is at its core about facing reality, no matter how harsh, and then transforming it. He had scorn for self-deception and what we might call comforting lies. Recall that Nietzsche dramatically declared God is dead not to celebrate, but to force society to confront a truth the old certainties have vanished, and we must not live in denial of that. He respected those who had the courage to see things as they are. So what would he say about our truth dodger? Likely he'd see him as a symptom of what he called nihilism. Not in the sense that the man believes in nothing, but in the sense that he's staring into the abyss of meaninglessness and flinching. Instead of grappling with the hard questions, do I love this person? Is this job meaningful? Who am I, and what do I want? The truth dodger turns away, seeking refuge in distraction or half-truths. Nietzsche gives us a metaphor for this in Thus Spoke Zarathustra and other works, the idea of gazing into the abyss. To become wise or to grow, one must be willing to gaze into the abyss of truth. The deep, dark, perhaps frightening reality of things like one's own flaws, life's lack of inherent meaning, the certainty of death, etc. The fearful truth dodger refuses to gaze. He blinks and turns on the TV. This, Nietzsche would likely argue, is a form of cowardice and self-imposed stupor. He wrote with biting candor, "Truth is ugly. We have art so as not to perish from the truth." This line can be read in two ways. On one hand, it recognizes that raw truth can be overwhelming, even devastating. Thus, humans use art imagination, even illusions, to cope, so that truth doesn't destroy them. But notice Nietzsche doesn't say we have lies, so we don't perish of the truth, he says art. Something creative, life-affirming. The fearful truth dodger, however, isn't exactly indulging in artful illusions. He's often indulging in mere escapism. There's a difference. Art, in Nietzsche's sense, can reveal deeper truths in indirect ways and help us affirm life despite its ugliness. Pure escapism, or denial by contrast, is a retreat from life. Nietzsche would likely prefer an uncomfortable truth over a comfortable lie any day, because only with truth can you build a meaningful life. When you dodge truth, you live in a fragile bubble. Sooner or later, reality will puncture it, and then you're left defenseless. Think of our ghosting man by refusing to face the truth of his relationship feelings and have an honest breakup. He might avoid discomfort now, but he's sowing future pain. His ex is hurt more by the ghosting, and he knows deep down he acted like a coward, which will haunt his self-respect. Or consider his career avoidance. He stays in a miserable job by avoiding the truth of his dissatisfaction, and maybe years pass. One day, he might snap or get laid off or simply wake up with immense regret at all the time lost. The reckoning always comes, and the longer it's delayed, the more it hurts. As the saying goes, you can ignore reality, but you cannot ignore the consequences of ignoring reality. The fearful truth dodger is trying to ignore reality, and by doing so, he ensures that when the consequences hit, they hit hard and without mercy. Nietzsche's remedy for this is encapsulated in his concept of the intellectual conscience. In Beyond Good and Evil, he praises those rare individuals who have a conscience in intellectual matters, meaning they refuse to deceive themselves. They feel a moral duty to truth, even if it's inconvenient or painful. Most people, he implies, lack this. They take refuge in convenient beliefs and half-truths because it's easier. But to Nietzsche, living in untruth is living in decadence. It's a slow rot of the spirit. He would encourage the truth dodger to cultivate courage. Live dangerously, he famously wrote, not just in the physical sense, but intellectually and emotionally. Dare to question yourself. Dare to sit in silence without reaching for a distraction, and listen to what your inner voice is saying, however disquieting it may be. If you are unhappy, dare to admit, "I am unhappy." That simple acknowledgement is the first step to change. If you feel meaningless, confront that head-on. My life feels meaningless. Good. Now you're at the truth. Now you can start seeking or creating meaning. The fearful truth dodger suffers in a peculiar way on the surface. He might appear free of trouble, but inside anxiety and dread accumulate. It's the dread of the truths unspoken and choices unmade. Many modern ailments, chronic anxiety, a sense of emptiness, the feeling of being lost, can often be traced to truths we're not facing. Nietzsche was a psychologist at heart. He'd likely diagnose these ailments as the psyche's cry for authenticity. When you avoid truth, you avoid yourself, because who you really are is entwined with those truths. It's notable that Nietzsche titled his autobiography Ecce Homo, Behold the Man, with the subtitle How One Becomes What One Is. Becoming who you are is impossible if you refuse to face what is true about you and your life. The truth dodger. By running, is stagnant. He cannot become anything, let alone himself, because he's stuck in avoidance. In the contemporary scene, truth dodging is practically an epidemic. It's easier than ever to distract ourselves 24/7. With streaming media endless feeds on our devices, the dopamine drip of games and notifications, we can easily drown out the voice inside that asks, "Am I living rightly?" Some particularly modern forms of truth-dodging ghosting, as in our story, avoiding the awkward or painful conversations in relationships, canceling plans or commitments last minute because we don't feel like it, rather than addressing why we overcommitted, or even more broadly, denial about world issues because they're scary. So we just consume entertainment and pretend everything's okay. On a personal level, many live in denial of their health issues or in denial of financial problems. Each avoidance plants a ticking time bomb of suffering. Nietzsche might not have foreseen smartphones, but he understood the human tendency to shirk from hard truths. His challenge to us would be practice honesty, especially with yourself. One of his piercing questions was, what truth do you dare not admit to yourself? The way out of the truth dodger's trap is exactly that, to dare to admit it. Yes, it may cause a crisis. Admitting I don't love my partner could lead to a breakup. Admitting I hate my career could force a daunting change. But that crisis is purifying. It's real, and through it, you can build a life that isn't a lie. Nietzsche emphasized the concept of self-overcoming. Overcoming not external enemies, but the internal obstacles we place in front of ourselves. For the truth dodger, the biggest obstacle is fear. Overcoming that fear, say by finally having that difficult conversation, finally saying out loud what you've been avoiding, is a triumph of the spirit. It's painful for a moment, but liberating for the rest of your life. Think of the relief our story's man might feel if he faced the truth. He sits down and tells his girlfriend honestly how he feels. It will hurt her. It will be hard. But after that storm clarity, both are free to move on. No more guilt gnawing at him for ghosting someone. Or, if he faces the truth of hating his job, maybe he'll quit. Maybe he'll downsize his lifestyle to afford a career change or further education in a field he actually cares about. Scary, yes. But also imagine the pride and empowerment he'd feel. He would no longer be a passive passenger in life. He'd be in the driver's seat. That's worth the price of some discomfort. As Nietzsche might say, better an uncomfortable truth than a comfortable delusion. In fact, embrace the uncomfortable truths as the birthplaces of growth. It's in the very act of facing them that we step into a more authentic existence. We have now seen Nietzsche's 4 doomed personalities in all their tragic complexity: the moral narcissist, the eternal victim, the hollow conformist, and the fearful truth dodger. It's time to step back and ask, what can we do about it? Nietzsche didn't dissect these patterns just to mock human frailty. He did it to challenge us to rise above. In our final section, let's gather some practical takeaways and Nietzschean principles that can help transform this suffering into strength. And finally, we'll end with an emotional provocation, a call to arms for your soul, in Nietzsche's own words. You might be wondering, now what I saw myself in some of these types, how do I change? Nietzsche didn't offer comfort. He offered confrontation, the kind that transforms. Start by embracing amor fati. Love your fate, especially the painful parts. Turn them into fuel. Practice ruthless honesty. Confront truths you've avoided. Say it aloud. Then act. Trade resentment for creative responsibility. You may not control what happened, but you control your response. Step into that power. Feeling hollow. Forge your own values. Ask what you believe in, not what society handed you. Choose a purpose that fills the void with meaning. And if you tend to judge others, turn that energy inward. Self-overcoming is the path. Be better than who you were yesterday. This isn't easy. Nietzsche never said it would be. But he did say, he who has a why to live for can bear almost anyhow. So ask yourself, what's your why? Look at your life. If you see shadows of these types, don't run. Face them. Own your story. Become who you are. Because as Nietzsche said, no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. And now the question remains, will you seize your life?